Okay, so let's go ahead and set up Prettier. I'm just going to uninstall mine first. Oh man, this is like severing a limb. Okay, I uninstalled it. Prettier's gone. Okay, so just to review for anyone who didn't remember, Prettier allows us to format our code in a bunch of different languages. Okay, we're working with HTML and CSS. Those are on this list. JavaScript is the next big one, but it'll work with all of these. And it's amazing. Okay, if I look at any given HTML file in here, you can see that there's a really nice structure here. Every time there's an element inside of something else, it's indented really nicely, so it's really easy to see where things are at. You'll notice that I only have double quotes for everything. There's not a single quote in this entire thing, unless maybe for like an apostrophe. The CSS styles are indented as well. If I look at a specific CSS file, you can see it automatically did line breaks here, which was nice. It automatically put a single space before every single curly brace. Like, I didn't have to worry about any of that. Okay. I didn't make these line breaks either. It noticed that this was a really long line, and so it went ahead and did some line breaks. Okay, so let's go ahead. We'll try to get this Prettier extension set up. So I'm going to go to extensions, and that is just this little 4 squares right here with the one separating right there. And I'm going to search for Prettier. Now, a couple of things will come up. Let me just open this up nice and big so you can see. Even Prettier now and Prettier code formatter. Looking at these, I want you to look at 2 numbers. Well, or I guess 1 number, but you want to look at how many downloads it's had. So Prettier, this code formatter one, 14.4 million. This one's 289,000. This one's 100,000. These ones have higher stars, but also like 20 times less downloads. Okay, so the one that we're going to do is this Prettier code formatter. And so I'm just going to click on it, and I can hit install right here, or I can hit this blue install button over here as well. We'll give that a sec, and it should require a reload. So I'm just going to go ahead. Okay, so I'm just going to hit quit. I'm going to close VS Code. It's closed, and I'm just going to reopen it. I don't think it required a reload for me. Like there should have been a pop-up to show that, but I don't think it showed it because I just uninstalled it without reloading. So, okay, I see this thing activating extensions. So I have a few different extensions that are working down here. But what I want to do first, I want to set up a couple of settings inside VS Code. So Windows users, if you go into File, Preferences and Settings, Mac users, Code, Preferences, Settings, go ahead and click on Settings. And then I'm just going to search for the word Prettier. Okay, and I can see that there are about 28 different settings that I can configure with Prettier. It's a bunch of stuff. Okay, and so I want to make this be basically everything that will work with me. And then last but not least, I want to make sure that my VS Code is set to automatically format every time a file saves. Okay, so right here, you can leave this as always. This is a JavaScript thing. Controls the printing of spaces inside object literals. I would leave a check there. Again, that's mainly a JavaScript thing. This Prettier config path, you can actually have a file that will have way more than 28 settings. It probably has like around 100 different things that you can customize. You could really customize it. Maybe in a couple years, we can worry about that. Embedded language formatting, auto, controls whether it's enabled or not, check. Debug logs for troubleshooting, I'll leave unchecked. If it becomes an issue, I can check it. Specify the end of line used by Prettier. Okay, I'll just leave that on default. White space sensitivity, I'll leave that on the default too. This Prettier ignore, I could make a file called .prettier ignore, kind of like this one. This one's called git ignore. That's just something that says, hey, are there certain files that you don't want Prettier to mess with? And I've never made a file like this, but if you wanted to configure something like that, you could. We'll leave this one unchecked. JSX bracket, same line. I like to put a check mark here. Again, this is kind of getting deeper into JavaScript. So you don't have to worry about it right here if you want to. Use single quotes instead of double quotes. I always leave that checked. Just so it'll always use single quotes and be consistent. We don't have to put anything there for the module. Print width. So this right here, I showed you guys that like, where was it? Oh, I think it was my site CSS. Let's see. Oh, down here. So this was all on one line of code, and it was more than 80 characters long. Okay, and because I specified 80 characters for that threshold, it wrapped it. Okay, and it put things on you. You could set this to 100 or 120 or even 40. You could set that to anything you want. 80 is a pretty typical standard. A lot of jobs you go to, they'll tell you 80. You know, they want the code of all the developers to look the same across the board. And 80 is really standard. Markdown, we can just leave that as preserve. Quote props, we'll leave that as needed. You can leave these as unchecked. Add a semicolon at the end of every line. Again, that's a JavaScript thing. I would check it. Single quote, I would check it. Tab width. So what this does is when you hit tab, it can vary in size depending on what editor you're using or what operating system you're using. And Prettier can say, hey, we're going to force it to be 2 spaces or 4 spaces. I like having 2 and oh, whoops. It's like if we look at this HTML file, that looks like a 4-space tab right there. So that's nice and big. That looks like it's 4 spaces. But any JavaScript file that I have open, it'll always be 2 tabs. CSS or 2 spaces. CSS, you can see 2 spaces right there. So you can set that as well. Trailing comma, we'll leave that at ES5 as its default. Oh, good shot to the top. Okay. And we're getting there. Tab width, ES5. Editor config, we're not going to use. Indent lines with tabs. It's either using tabs or spaces. I like it when it uses spaces. Just that if I format something with like 2 spaces for a tab, it'll look the same for you guys, no matter what your tab width is set at. View will leave. Node modules we'll leave. We don't want to do that. Default formatter is Prettier. That's good. Default HTML formatter is Prettier. Good. JavaScript less. Good, 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 good. We want all these to be Prettier. Okay. So we'll leave that the way it is. All right. Now let's make sure that we are going to save with formatting every time. So I'm going to go back in here and I'll say format on save. Good. Editor, format on save. You want to make sure that this is checked. Okay. Because then every time you save a file, it'll format it for you. So let me show you an example. Here's my CSS file. What I'm going to do, I'm going to really mess this thing up. Okay. And then Prettier will fix it for me. So I'm going to select all these spaces, like all these spaces, and I'm going to remove them. Okay. See, doesn't that just look ugly? That just looks awful. Let's try something fun here too. I'm going to select a few semicolons, and I'm just going to hit delete to put those onto the same line. Look, that looks awful. Okay, that's a lot of stuff. Let's see if Prettier can fix it. I'm going to hit Control S or Command S, I guess. And look at that. It just fixed it. It's like magic. Okay. It put the indents back in for all my stuff. It added line breaks for everything. That's Prettier. And that just happened when I saved it. You know, so same thing with my HTML. You know, like if I decided I wanted to copy this div and put it over here. Okay. Paste. Oh, it pasted it right there. But let's say it pasted it like that. As soon as I save it, it's going to fix it. Okay. And so it's really nice because it just helps you to keep your code clean.